All right. Welcome to the five deadly sins of strategy. My name is Adam Thomas, and I will be walking you through. But before we begin, I want to start with just a very light way for us to get ready for this workshop. Couple of things, couple of house cleaning things. One is mute by default if you're joining us on Zoom. Two is to use reactions wherever you are, whether it's YouTube, LinkedIn, or here on Zoom. Be prepared, write notes, and use the chat. I like to see what you're thinking. I like to see what you're feeling through all of these slides in this workshop. So, and there is going to be an exercise component. I want you to think. It's not just a one way communication. This is something that's happening between us. Right? I'm going to learn from you. You're going to learn from me. So, if you're ready to jump in, go ahead and press one in the chat now. Okay, awesome. So, where do we start? Well, I want to start with the idea that most folks get strategy wrong. Most teams get strategy wrong. And for us to level set, I want us to start with what strategy isn't. Strategy is not a list of features. Just if they're just a list of goals, that is probably an objective that should be nested inside of a strategy, not the strategy itself. Because if you just have objectives, you can't really tell what the priority is. Next, strategy is not prescriptive. Strategy is not a plan. You don't tell people we're going to do A, B, C, D, and E. Strategy is designed to tackle complex problems. And the thing about complex problems is that they have solutions that you don't see yet. And so if you're telling people what to do and you don't know what the solution looks like, right, you're just leading to a bunch of frustration. Third is academic. Academic strategies that lead to nothing, create nothing. So if you're going around talking about the numbers and the white paper and this concept, it's not really moving the needle. People aren't following it. Let's talk about what strategy is. Strategy helps teams focus, gives teams room to grow, and is open to randomness. Those are three components of a strategy. Now, how do you get there? Well, you focus on a problem. What is the problem that you're trying to solve? And clear problems help teams prioritize. Now, these problems aren't going to be simple. They have to include a team, right? You have to bring people along. Strategy is for teams of different disciplines. And so it has to be big enough for folks to get in on it and apply their expertise. It should be descriptive. Remember, strategies are complex. Descriptive strategies help people understand what's happening around them. They also help you prioritize even further because you can talk about what type of company you are versus what type of company you aren't. And they should drive learning. If strategies aren't driving learning, then they aren't moving the team forward. They're not. A team is not able to adapt to changing conditions because if they're not learning, they're stagnant. Good strategy is like a plant, right? Good strategy is a plant. It grows. It has to adapt to the soil around it. Plans are like metal sheets, right? And in complex conditions, plants find a way to grow. Like a rose can grow from concrete, but metal just rusts, it degrades. Metal becomes a maintenance that if you're not maintaining and if you're in a complex environment, it doesn't evolve, it just stays stagnant. To hammer that, I want to bring up what Roger Martin talks about. Roger Martin is the author to Playing to Win, and I think one of the better books on strategy. If you want to read it, I highly recommend it. Something he's been saying a lot lately is strategy is the opposite of planning. I find that super important because most people think about strategy as a plan. In fact, we go to strategy planning meetings, right? Strategy is the opposite of planning. Strategy is the opposite of planning, right? Strategy is alive. We're creating an environment. Planning is a direction, right? It's a plan. And so now that we have an understanding of what strategy is, uh, teams don't just fail at creating strategy, they fail at executing strategy. And that is what this workshop here is for today. Uh, we're going to talk about executing strategy because you may not be in the strategy creation business, right? It's good for you to know what strategy creation is, and there's a lot of work that goes into that, and it's nice to have an understanding. But everybody's in the strategy execution business, and we have some really bad news because 90% of organizations fail to execute their strategy successfully. And if you're a part of an organization, you are a part of that. How do you know your strategy or the strategy, not necessarily your strategy, the strategy is not being used? Put a 2 in the chat if you've never seen this screen before. All right. Well, that's interesting. A bunch of folks have seen it before. Usually I get a lot of 2s here. Uh, yes, Meg. Um, it's a screen inside of shared. It's a screen inside of your Google Doc. It's called an activity dashboard, and that activity dashboard is where you'll see if people have viewed your document, the trend of viewers, the commenting, the sharing history. It's inside of every Google Doc that you create. I think Microsoft has a similar thing inside of Teams, and you look at Microsoft Word docs. Either way, if it looks like this, and you're the only person that viewed it inside of the company, the strategy is not being executed. I can be pretty sure, right? And what you end up having is a what I call the Google Drive graveyard. Um, and the Google Drive graveyard is where strategies go to die. It, it's when you have a kickoff for a strategy, the leadership goes, "We got this strategy, we're going to go knock it out." Everybody cheers at the beginning of the fiscal year. But 6 months in, the activity screen looks like this. And so you find yourself in the land really of no strategy. And this is the land that most people live in. And one thing you'll notice about the land of no strategy is stuff gets done. We're constantly doing things. No one generally comes to work and does nothing. That being said, inside of this land of no strategy, uh, we don't really have a direction. And we end up with products that are not aligned to the vision and a sense of anxiety because we don't really know where we're going. And so, if you're a leader, your job is to create an environment where strategy can be executed. If you're an individual contributor, your job is to provide data that improves that strategy execution. And at that intersection is overcoming the 5 deadly sins of strategy. These are the 5 deadly sins that stop strategy from being executed. They are hiddenness, ambiguousness, untrustworthiness, selfishness, staleness. You can break that down into a set of the following questions. Does anybody know the strategy exists? If it's hidden, then no, they don't. Who is the strategy for? If your strategy does not have a clear person and problem in mind, it's ambiguous. And so we don't know where we're going. Untrustworthiness. How can a strategy build trust in the work that we do? Uh, it's important that your strategy is trust building because you're working with a bunch of different folks. Remember, strategy is designed to help complex teams tackle complex problems. And complex teams are teams with multiple disciplines. Selfishness. How does this strategy help us, not me? Building on that, if one side is untrustworthiness, where they don't trust the information, the other side is teams, other folks inside of the team and around the team don't see themselves in it, so they don't use it. And then staleness. Strategy needs to change. It needs to change to fit reality. How often are you updating it? Remember, strategy is complex. The environment around it changes. The description of the environment should change. So if it's not changing to fit reality, then people will ignore it. If you're a leader, you'll learn some tactics that will help guide your team to cohesion. This is going to help you build better strategy ops. If you're not a leader, then you're going to learn some questions that you can ask to help improve the strategic process. These are questions you can take back to your boss to get a better understanding of strategy. And to take it even further, you'll learn more about strategy working inside of your team, right? There may be different definitions for things, but these questions are going to help you understand what they are. And when you become a leader, you'll have a better toolkit to create strategy, and you'll know what good strategy looks like. To help us go through this, we're going to use the Bobco product team. And so Bobco is a fake company that I've created. It's an amalgamation of the companies that I have worked for, I have consulted with, right? All of these case studies are examples that I have seen in my life, right? And so Bobco is the imaginary team that's going to help us go through it so I don't get sued. Let's begin. Hiddenness, which is a dilemma of invisible strategy. At Bobco, Jane and her leadership team devised a strategy to enhance AI data utilization, aiming at staying ahead of competitors. Initially, Jane was confident in the plan, but as months passed, she noticed a troubling pattern. Teams were merely executing tasks without understanding how their work fit into the broader strategy. And so the consequences were pretty clear. Initiatives were disjointed, innovation was stifled, and critical opportunities were slipping through their fingers. The tension grew as Jane observed the teams completing deliverables that didn't align with the company objectives. The lack of strategic awareness led to wasted effort, creating a growing gap between the leadership vision and the on-the-ground execution. Jane was pretty frustrated, recognizing that the very strategy she had helped craft was being undermined by its own invisibility. We were walking headfirst into the world of invisible strategy. As you heard in that story, teams don't know what the strategy is. And so they don't know how to move forward. It's not their fault. It's just no one brings it up. And as you all know, when you're working, you got a bunch of things happening every day. And if you're not seeing something, if something's not being repeated, if something is not being brought up, it can fall into the background, because if it's not being brought up, your brain is naturally going to think it's not important. Teams don't know, and if it's not being brought up, it's rare that teams even know it exists, so they're not going to look for it. And so they're waiting for the next person to tell them something. They become reactive. And so how do you absolve this sin? You make the strategy available, and you point people to strategy. Instead, when they ask a question, you point people to that strategy. So in Jane's case, she brought the strategy out the shadows. She introduced a dedicated strategy segment in every weekly planning meeting. Right? When you're thinking about planning, right, you might have sprint planning. Again, that's not at the strategic level, but on the tactical level, you need to have some sort of planning mechanism, because you need to see what's going on for the week ahead. Now, if you talk about strategy in that planning mechanism, now you're making a link between the strategy and the local plan. And so you get some progress. You can understand progress, alignment, and rationale. So for you as an individual contributor, you can ask a couple questions like, how are current initiatives aligned with the company's strategic objectives? You can raise your hand and ask your manager that right now. Where can I find the most updated version of our strategy? If you're in the work, if you're working in product specifically, you can say, "Hey, I'm looking to adjust our backlog against the strategy. Where can I find the most up to date version?" Right? And these questions are not only probably going to get you the strategy, that also signals to your boss you're thinking about problems from their point of view. And if you work in a larger company or even a smaller company, right, there's a direction that people want to go into. By asking questions about that direction, you're signaling that you're paying attention. And so ultimately, Jane implemented that strategy session. The team engaged and started asking questions to Jane, which helped her build better strategy sessions. And then Bobco standardized the strategy accessibility across their platforms. As they saw Jane's team success, they started doing more of it. So they became informed. They started to contribute. There was more innovation. Those initiatives were aligned against the strategy, and folks were less anxious as a result. Let's talk about ambiguity, the second sin. At Bobco, under Larry's leadership, the year started off with high energy and enthusiasm. The teams were eager, producing new features at a rapid pace. But as the year progressed, it became evident that these features were not advancing the vision. The product became a collection of scattered functions that lacked coherent direction. Despite the hard work, they were missing the mark. So when Larry reviewed the roadmap and saw new features, although innovative and disconnected, right, Larry got really frustrated. Right, the team's working well. He can't say the team isn't working hard. They're working very hard, but it's not connecting. Um, Everyone's working in silos. They're chasing the next shiny object, and so he finds himself and his team right in the land of ambiguity. And so, how do you know that you're working in ambiguity? Well, the team makes products without focus. There isn't a person or problem that's super clear to you. And so you end up with a lot of wasted time and effort. You can't qualify your product because to the person that you're qualifying it for changes completely. It changes all the time. And so the way to absolve it is to use a tool I've learned in journalism called the 5 Ws. Whenever you're making something, you want to identify who it's for, what is it, when is it supposed to affect someone, where is it supposed to affect someone, and why. And if those answers start to gel, you have a very clear direction that you're going in. If they aren't and they're different for each release, well, you can start to quickly see what ambiguity is doing. The great thing is, this doesn't take a lot of time. So before any initiative, just popping those 5 Ws and just asking very quickly what they are can tell you so much. And so Larry took it to the next level. And so with each release, each sprint demo, he would begin each demo with the 5 Ws for every single thing that they were releasing. So at the beginning, he would say, this is for who, what, when, where, and why. Not only did it force the team to, align to that, it also helped those who were listening to the strategy start to create a narrative. If you're an IC or an individual contributor, ask a couple of these questions. What do the success metrics look like for this initiative or project? Considering the product vision and the 5 Ws. And as an IC, take a shot at filling out the 5 Ws. If you can't fill out the 5 Ws, that's another thing to ask. Help me figure out what these 5 Ws are. I want to make sure that my work is aligned. In what specific ways does this initiative deliver value to our target customer? And I want to articulate our product strategy to stakeholders using these key elements. Could you confirm their alignment? Again, taking those 5 W's and saying, hey, does this match what you see? Can do wonders about execute when it comes to executing strategy. And so Larry featured those 5 W's. The team began to each initiative by explicitly asking and connecting it to those 5 W's. And the transformation was significant. Right, the team began linking those initiatives to past outcomes. You started to see a build on those previous successes rather than working in isolation. Things became much more focused, and as a result, other teams like marketing and sales had way better points to start their work because they knew who this was for. The team aligned their efforts, and there were meaningful contributions to the company's success. It didn't just improve the product; it revitalized the team because now they could see what they were doing and why they were doing it. Let's talk about untrustworthiness. At Bobco, Hannah's department was notorious for being a black hole of information. Unfortunately, for a lot of product teams, this is very true. If I Sometimes I'll talk to different executives um, for these teams, other teams like sales or marketing or legal, and one of their complaints will be, "Well, the product team doesn't really tell us anything. The product managers, designers, engineers, I don't really hear from them. So we feed them information, nothing comes back out unless it's a release." And so those other departments tend to get distrustful and they feel shut out and suspicious. There's strained communications, relationships, and failed collaborations that really hamper company progress. If you're a leader on the director or VP level, it's really important. I think this is the sin that you need to pay the most attention to because no one tells you that you need to be doing this, but you need to be doing this. You need to be getting the trust of your peers, not your product peers. Of course, you need to get their trust, but you need to get the trust of the other folks that work with you, uh, other directors, other VPs. Tipping point came when there was a critical project that stalled because another department refused to share vital data. And so the way that they do this is they don't say we're not sharing it with you. They just keep avoiding you, right? And then something stalls. And then when called to the carpet, they'll talk about transparency and accountability, and it'll be flipped back on you. And so it's really important that you gain the trust of other teams. So how do you know this is happening? Well, whatever you say something, people are going around and trying to confirm those answers. And it's important because if they're doing that, then they don't trust you. And if they don't trust you, everything grinds to a halt. During the Google Aristotle, uh, there's a Google Aristotle project, right? And Google took a look at how teams worked, and um, one of the things they came up with is a team's efficacy is based on trust. Essentially, 60% of a team's efficacy is based on trust. So, if you are taking a test and I told you that I took 60% of 100 out of your test immediately, right? You're going to fail. So when I say work grinds to a halt, essentially it grinds to a halt. You have a failing grade. If you're not, there's no trust there, you automatically have a failing grade. And so one of the ways you build trust is accountability. Remember, I said a black hole of information. It's important for product teams, designers, engineers to talk about their wins and losses regularly. Keep your word. Um, and so in this case, Hannah decided to start sharing detailed postmortems with her peers, all the department leaders, highlighting successes and failures. And so those postmortems became a turning point. Right? A postmortem is when you write out what happened, why it happened, and how it won't happen again. It tells people what lessons you're learning on a regular basis. And so that black hole certainly becomes right. Something goes in, you start to learn if it worked or not. So the team perception of the team began to shift. It went from secretive to being honest and accountable. If you're an IC working in this space, and you want to be more trustworthy, uh, ask your boss during your next one-on-one, who are the key contacts in Team X that I can talk to build stronger relationships. What steps should we take if an initiative fails? All right, if we have a significant challenge and things don't go well. Do we have a defined protocol for pivoting or addressing failures? Um, One of the workshops that I think I guess I'm known for, right, is exactly answering that question around pivoting and addressing failures. But it's called survival metrics. But other than that, right, there should be a way. If your team is failing, you should be talking about this. Uh, FYI, if you're working in product, um, the going rate for failures is 60 to 90% of the time. So if you're telling me that you're never failing, I have to start asking real questions, right? Are you even tracking? Um, that number comes from Ronnie Kohavi, who was the director of innovation at Microsoft, Airbnb, and Amazon. Right, this is somebody that has seen a lot of product and innovation. So 60 to 90%. Another thing you can ask for is I'm looking to enhance collaboration by sharing more data with other teams. How can I do that? What's the best practices for me sharing stuff? Hannah made her postmortems public, and her team engaged with open discussions around success and failure. Again, even if your team isn't very comfortable around sharing this stuff publicly first, get used to sharing it privately. Have those discussions around success and failure. Build postmortems internally. And then once you feel comfortable, shift out. Um, and so Bobco evolved. The transformation was profound, trust was rebuilt, and people started talking again. Learning started happening, innovation started flowing, people started to not hoard information. A shared understanding and mutual respect. People weren't coming after each other. And the product was trusted again. Next is selfishness, the shortcoming of siloed success. At Bobco, Scott's strategy initially appeared effective, driving quick wins. But as time went on, it was clear that the strategy was too narrowly focused because people were alienated. They just, other departments began to withdraw their support, slowing progress. They weren't actively fighting it, but they just kind of fell back. And so Scott noticed the lack of cross functional collaboration, and um, a key initiative really stalled because he just couldn't get people to connect. He needed to change what was going on. And what was going on was there was a lot of I, right? If you ever heard of the term, there's no I in team, right? There's no I in team. Um, and so if you're using the term I a lot in your written and vocal communication, you should stop that. Don't say I, say we, right? Include other people in that conversation. Uh, a team that doesn't see a benefit for themselves can only give you so much. Uh, they can only do so much. They can only connect so much. And so to absolve that sin, you got to learn what makes other teams tick. How do you connect with them? Are you connecting with them? Do they see themselves in your communications outward? Um, you can leverage leading and lagging indicators to tell a story. Now, this is this requires a lot of work around metrics. Again, if you have any questions around that, feel free to reach out. Happy to help walk you through leading and lagging indicators. If you do know what they are, right, they're a way for you to bridge what a metric that you care about to a metric that somebody else cares about, right? And if your story includes other people's metrics and you make a clear connection to the work that you do, to the work that they do, to the work that affects the company from revenue to cost, it's a lot easier to tell a story that is collaborative. And so, on a way to do that, Scott introduced a concept called lean coffee sessions. These are informal structure meetings where teams can and people can voice their concerns, insights, and provide feedback on strategic direction. Generally, this would happen um, with leaders, other leaders on the team. Not only does Scott get to hear, other leaders get to hear what other leaders are thinking about, right? And it just creates more of a connectivity between the team. And so you could use these sessions to recalibrate strategy. If you're an IC, you can ask questions like, how does this initiative contribute to the overall product vision across departments? I want to enhance our product strategy by incorporating insights from other teams. What are the best practices of connecting with those other teams? Uh, or lastly, you can spend some time with another discipline. And that's always a good thing because you'll get a chance to see how other people work. So Scott integrated other teams' initiatives into the strategy during lean coffee sessions. Right, stop using that I, started using more we, and the team dedicated more time to understanding and addressing how their work impacted others. And so the transformation happened. Right, what was once a strategy that alienated others became a collective effort, with departments across Bobco now fully engaged and supportive. Scott felt a deep sense of relief and accomplishment as he recalibrated strategy to and folks started feeling like they were a part of that strategy itself. Now, we're coming around the bend. The last one, the last sin, which is staleness. I make this last because you could be knocking out the other four, doing a great job. But if you don't acknowledge the strategy shifting, then if you're not changing it, then it just kind of falls apart. Even if you're doing the other four things, because you're not thinking about how the world itself is changing. And so Alicia's team at Bobco basically fell into this trap where they had significant success. They had early wins, strong marketing positioning, and inside of the company, people knew and trusted it. But the market evolves, right? The people around you aren't staying still. You're not staying still. The strategy started to fall apart. Teams started to notice subtle shifts, and Alicia couldn't explain it. When other teams were asking, hey, what's going on with the strategy? Hey, what's going on long term? Things started to decline, and Bobco started losing its competitive edge. And so the tension became pretty high when a major competitor launched a feature that directly addressed the gap in Bobco's offering, meaning they got caught and captured a portion of market share. The strategy wasn't effective anymore, and uh, she needed to increase the strategy's effectiveness, or else she would find herself out. And so that's what complacency does, right? The strategy hasn't been updated. That's a really simple one. This is the easiest one to work with. Right? Strategy hasn't been updated in a while. Strategy should help teams make decisions. We work in changing circumstances, and if it's not addressing those changing circumstances, then it becomes stale. And you want to include a regular strategy review and update sessions. Right? I like to think about this doing it, about once a month, once every 6 weeks, and taking a look at the strategy and just sitting down and seeing what should change. Do we have any data that's guiding us to change? So, determined to prevent further losses, Alicia instituted that monthly strategy review session. During these meetings, her team thoroughly examined market trends, competitor actions, and internal performance data. This allowed them to identify threats and opportunities and dynamically adjust their strategy in response. If you're wondering what to do with your SWOT analysis, this is a great place to use it. If you're asking questions and you're an IC, individual contributor, how do we ensure our product vision remains aligned with current trends? What stage should we? What should we take? What steps should we take if we notice our product strategy is becoming outdated? And I'd like to propose a process to regularly incorporating new data into our product decisions. How can we do that? How can I help you do that? As a result, Alicia instituted those monthly strategy update sessions. The fresh data that the team was providing her really helped keep things current. And Bobco regained its competitive edge because they were able to start to uh, they were able to adapt, and they were able to uh, get ahead of the competition. Right? They kept their ears to the ground, and innovation started to happen much quicker. Quicker. Right? And that's what we do this for. We do this so we don't end up in that Google Drive graveyard. By making sure our strategy isn't stale, by making sure our strategy isn't selfish, by making sure our strategy isn't trustworthy, by making sure our strategy isn't ambiguous, and making sure that our strategy is not hidden, we have an opportunity to execute strategy as it is and get the most out of what we have. Remember, good strategy is like a plant. If you water it, if you tend to it, if you nurture it, you'll get a lot out of that plant. That plant will figure it out. But if you don't, then it'll die. As we round out the end of this workshop, I want to give you 5 minutes to fill out some takeaways you've gotten from this presentation and what you intend to do after. How do you intend to use this information? I'll give you 5 minutes to write this out. All right. Give folks just a couple of seconds here to finish up. And so, if you leave here with anything, remember that executing strategy. 90% of organizations fail to execute their strategy successfully. Strategies are the opposite of planning, and you're looking to avoid this, right? Which is a sign that you're in the Google Drive graveyard. So, two things I'd like for you to do if you're watching this now or in the future. I'd love to share your experience with this workshop. There's a link to a feedback form. Please fill it out. Give you a minute or two to do so. All right. And finally, if you want to dig in, there's also a Miro board here that has everything that I talked about, and some with even more detail. If you want to take this back to your team and run it as a session, um, here is the Miro board. As a matter of fact, let me make sure I drop a link here in the chat. I'll stick around for any questions now that we're done here. If you don't have any questions, my email is adam.thomas@hey.com. Feel free to ask any questions. And I hope you create great strategy. Thank you.